When a statue comes down, what does it mean? Is it erasing history, or is it something else entirely? Hi, my name's Bethany Belial, and this is The Statues Will Cry Out. In previous episodes, we've talked about why statues matter and who builds them. And today, we're asking the question, why do they come down? To answer that, we're going to look at three things: the way statues are removed, who pushes for removal, and what it does politically. Not all statue removals look the same. In fact, there are a few very different ways they can happen. The first is an official removal. This occurs when legislative bodies, such as a city council, vote to remove monuments to reject ideologies of the statue, like white supremacy. Examples include the removal of Soviet era statues by Ukrainian officials to de Russify the landscape, and the removal of Robert E. Lee statue from the US Capitol by the Virginia Commonwealth. Official removal is a formal act of institutional legitimacy and a rare form of corrective justice against deceased rights violators. It signals that the state no longer endorses the values the monument represents. The next type is an unofficial removal. This involves protesters physically toppling or destroying statues, such as the Edward Colston statue in Bristol, which was dumped in a harbor. These acts are often seen as a triumph of grassroots agency and a rejection of institutionalized racism. However, they are frequently denounced by government officials as vandalism or a threat to public safety, thereby sending a message of unauthorized defiance of established laws. Many controversial statues are moved to museums to be historicized, such as the Jefferson Davis statue at the University of Texas, which was placed in an exhibit called From Commemoration to Education. Alternatively, they may be gathered in statue parks, like in Memento Park in Hungary, where Soviet monuments are displayed far from the capital to diminish their political impact. Relocation seeks to transform a monument from an active political instrument to a benign object of a detached historical gaze. While it preserves the artifact for study, critics argue it can also be a way for institutions to evade attention or whitewash history by moving it out of public view. Symbolic alteration involves altering a statue's appearance or surroundings while leaving it in place. Examples include graffiti, covering statues with blankets or shrouds, or projecting images of activists onto them. Some artists create counter monuments, such as the Madre Les statue placed in front of a Confederate monument in Baltimore. Symbolic alteration aims to block a statue's original speech act and force a radical resignification of the space. These interventions maintain a original history as material prompt for reflection while publicly dishonoring the subject. Each method sends a different message about legitimacy, authority, and control. How a statue comes down is just as important as why it comes down. So, why do people want statues removed in the first place? The decision to remove a statue typically stems from one of the following core arguments. First, the figure represents oppression or injustice. Many contested monuments celebrate colonial structures or figures who actively participated in colonialization, such as Cecile Rose, whose statue was seen as imposing a colonial ideology on the surrounding space. Similarly, statues of slave traders like Edward Colston are targeted because they glorify individuals who benefited from grave human rights abuses. Second, the statue promotes outdated or harmful values. Monuments often reflect dominant narratives of groups that were powerful at a specific time. For example, most Confederate monuments were erected during the Jim Crow and civil rights eras, specifically to promote white supremacy and lost cause outdated and harmful ideologies, rather than to provide an accurate history of the Civil War. Finally, the last argument is that public space should reflect current democratic ideals. There is a growing demand for the decolonization of national pasts and the creation of a more representative public space. Critics argue that 19th century monuments often celebrate unapproachable white men and are detached from the public, whereas modern society requires more inclusive spaces that allow for public interaction. These arguments are not merely emotional, they are strategic political communication messages used in what researchers call framing contests. One group may frame a statue as representing heritage, military value, or a truthful record of history, while an opposing group frames the same statue as representing harm, white supremacy, or an oppressive symbol. These competing messages define the dynamics of the debate. For instance, one side may claim the removal is an attempt to erase history, while the other strategically counters that removal is actually an act of learning from the past to provide a richer, more accurate understanding. Here is where debates over statues really become debates over meaning. When a statue is removed, something important happens. The message changes. A space that was once used for a monument to project power or victory begins to say something else entirely, often revealing the conflicting nature of public memory. Removal often serves as the physical manifestation of counter memory. Counter memory involves the articulation of alternative social and cultural voices that challenge and resist the dominant voices. It challenges established cultural memory. Removal can cause a symbolic rupture, where the meanings once associated with a structure are broken or radically reassigned. This can be seen when dominant symbols of an identity are targeted to signify the end of a old regime's authority. When symbols become intrinsically linked to bad things or oppressive ideologies, their presence can be felt as a symbolic violence, and their removal is required to break that association. This process is a way of reclaiming public space. Removing monuments from political spaces, such as in front of a city hall or court of justice, to less centralized spaces dramatically reduces their ability to command a preferred narrative. A common argument against removal is that it erases history, but many cultural researchers suggest the opposite. Taking down a statue isn't forgetting the past, it's arguing with it. It may have been able to erase the past earlier, but now history still exists in books, archives, and museums, and most extensively on the internet, which allows for a democratization of memory that makes it impossible to truly erase the records of the past. What removal actually does is challenge which version of history gets honored in public. It is a deliberate choice to stop using public land to provide a naturalizing locus for myths that exclude or marginalize certain members of the community. Ultimately, a statue removal is simply the latest chapter in a society's ongoing effort to come to terms with its own unfinished history. So, what did we learn? Removal isn't random, and it isn't just destruction. It's a political act driven by competing ideas about history, identity, and power. When a statue comes down, it means something has changed. So, here's our next question: who should have the final say? Governments, communities, or the public at large? Next time, we'll look at what happens after statues are removed and what replaces them.